When humanity first appeared before the Galactic Senate, nobody paid much attention. They were unremarkable. Moderate tolerance to temperature extremes, decent physical capabilities, nothing spectacular. The only mildly interesting fact was that they were one of the rare non-apex predator species to achieve sentience and space travel. But there was something else the Senate noted in their files, something concerning. Humans lacked unity. Their leaders changed constantly, often violently. A single assassination could trigger decades of internal war. Civil conflicts erupted over ideology, resources, territory, religion, everything and nothing. They were a fractured species held together by the thinnest threads of diplomacy. To most species in the Senate, this was merely unfortunate. To the Kethri Dominion, it was opportunity. Part 1. The Spark. Commander Vexith of the Kethri Dominion stood before his war council with barely concealed excitement. The insectoid warrior's mandibles clicked rhythmically as he gestured to the holographic display showing human-controlled space. 27 years, he said, his voice resonating with anticipation. 27 years we have watched and waited, and now, finally, the humans are tearing themselves apart. The display showed a dozen human factions engaged in open warfare. Political alliances that had held for decades were dissolving, trade routes were blockaded, colonies declared independence. The human government, such as it was, had fractured into warring states. The images from the conflict zones are disturbing, one of his generals remarked, his antennae twitching nervously. The humans show no restraint even against their own kind, no honor codes, no sacred truces, just calculated slaughter. Precisely, Vexith replied with predatory satisfaction. They are weak, divided, distracted. This is the moment we strike. The War Council voted unanimously. Within a week, 3 million Kethri soldiers and 200 warships crossed into human territory. The invasion was devastatingly effective. Human worlds fell like dominoes, their defenders scattered across a dozen internal conflicts, unable to coordinate a response. In 6 weeks, the Kethri conquered 73% of human-controlled space. Millions of humans died. Millions more were enslaved. The Senate watched in silence. Some members felt uncomfortable with the naked aggression, but none intervened. The humans were on the brink of extinction, and nobody wanted to be associated with a dying species. A few Senate members even provided the Kethri with supplies and intelligence in exchange for future territorial claims. The consensus was clear. Humanity would be extinct within months. Best to profit from their collapse rather than mourn it. But the Senate made a critical error. They assumed humans were like every other species they knew. They were catastrophically wrong. Part 2. The Turning. Senator Valara of the Plenary Confederacy was reviewing casualty reports when her aide burst into her office without knocking. "Senator, you need to see this immediately." The holographic display showed human territory, but something had changed. The internal fighting had stopped completely, overnight. "This must be an error," Senator Valara said, her crystalline features reflecting confusion. "Species don't just end civil wars, not like this." "It's verified, Senator. All 12 human factions signed a unified armistice 3 days ago. They're calling it the Emergency Coalition. Every human military force is being redirected to fight the Kethri." Valara stared at the display in disbelief. "That's impossible. These factions have been killing each other for 2 years. They have centuries of historical grievances. You can't just forgive that." "Apparently, humans can, Senator." The display shifted to show the Kethri front lines. For the first time in 8 months, they had stopped advancing. Not because they wanted to, because they couldn't. Human forces that had been fighting each other with savage efficiency were now fighting the Kethri with that same terrifying intensity. But there was something different now, something that made Valara's skin prickle with unease. The humans were coordinating. Commander Vexith received the reports with mounting frustration. 8 months of stalled progress. His forces outnumbered the humans 3-1. Their technology was superior. Their warriors were bred for combat. And yet they couldn't advance a single light year. "Explain this," he demanded of his intelligence officer. "The humans have adopted a defensive strategy, Commander. When they retake territory, they fortify it immediately. They dig in, as their communications describe it. They create layered defenses and wait for us to attack." "That's insane," Vexith spat. "Static defenses are suicide in modern warfare." "Yes, Commander, but the humans seem unconcerned with conventional military doctrine. They force us to assault prepared positions repeatedly. We take massive casualties. Then, when we're exhausted, they launch massive counteroffensives that push us back." Vexith's mandibles ground together in frustration. "This is madness. No species fights like this." "No other species has the casualty tolerance humans appear to possess, Commander. Our analysts believe they're willing to accept losses that would break any other civilization. Then we'll give them losses until they break." But they didn't break. 2 years became 4. 4 became 6. The largest war in 5 centuries ground on, and slowly, painfully slowly, the Kethri were being pushed back. Part 3. The price. Senator Valara stood in the Senate emergency chamber alongside representatives from all 9 core species. Before them, holographic displays showed the impossible. Human forces had retaken all their conquered territory and were now advancing into Kethri space. "We must intervene," she declared. "The humans won't stop. They're going to exterminate the Kethri entirely." Chancellor Drexen of the Chennari Ascendancy, the Senate's most powerful member, nodded gravely. "I agree. We assumed they would cease hostilities once their territory was recovered. We were wrong. The humans want revenge." The Senate voted quickly. An emergency peace summit would be convened. Both species would attend. A ceasefire would be brokered. To everyone's surprise, the humans accepted immediately. 3 days later, delegates gathered in the Grand Forum, a neutral space station designed specifically for diplomatic resolutions. The human delegation arrived first, 7 individuals led by a woman named Ambassador Chen. They were surprisingly calm, professional, and polite. The Kethri delegation arrived an hour later, led by Commander Vexith himself. His compound eyes regarded the humans with barely concealed hatred. Senator Valara facilitated the opening statements. The tone was formal, respectful. Both sides agreed that peace was preferable to continued bloodshed. Terms were proposed, territories were discussed, and then Commander Vexith made his mistake. "As the defending party," he stated, his translator rendering his clicking speech into Galactic Standard, "the Kethri Dominion demands full monetary compensation for all territories currently occupied by human forces. This is standard galactic law." The human delegation fell completely silent. Ambassador Chen tilted her head slightly. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" "Monetary compensation," Vexith repeated, "for territories we hold under occupation. This is our right under Senate regulations." The silence stretched longer. Several human delegates exchanged glances. One of them laughed, a short, bitter sound that made Valara's skin crawl. "Is something amusing?" Chancellor Drexen asked carefully. Ambassador Chen stood slowly. "Please excuse us. We need to discuss this among ourselves. We'll have an answer within the hour." Without another word, the entire human delegation filed out of the chamber. "Well," Chancellor Drexen said with satisfaction, "I believe they're preparing to accept. This went better than expected." Senator Valara wasn't so sure. She had studied human psychology extensively over the past 6 years. That laugh hadn't sounded like surrender. It had sounded like something breaking. Exactly 1 hour later, the chamber's main view screen activated. Ambassador Chen appeared, sitting alone in a small room. Her expression was perfectly neutral. For 30 seconds, she simply stared at them without speaking, without moving, just looking. "Computer, analyze emotional state," Chancellor Drexen ordered nervously.
The AI's synthesized voice responded immediately. Emotional analysis. Barely contained rage. Warning. Subject displays signs of extreme psychological stress. Ambassador Chen finally spoke, her voice terrifyingly calm. Honored Senate members, Commander Vexith, I regret to inform you that humanity cannot accept the proposed peace terms. Before anyone could respond, Commander Vexith's communications officer burst into the chamber. Sir, human fleet movements detected. The view screen split. Half showed Ambassador Chen. The other half showed a live feed from orbit around Kethrai Prime, the Dominion's homeworld. The entire human armada surrounded the planet, thousands of ships in perfect formation. When did you? Vexith began. 3 days ago, Chen replied, still speaking in that frighteningly calm voice. We arrived when you accepted the peace talks. We've been waiting. This is a violation of... However, Chen continued as if he hadn't spoken, we are willing to compromise. The word hung in the air like a blade. You see, Chen said, her eyes locked on Vexith, 16 billion humans have died in this war. 16 billion civilians slaughtered in the initial invasion. 16 billion people who were trying to rebuild their civilization after our civil war. Her voice never changed pitch, never wavered, but something in her eyes made Valara's blood run cold. So here is our compromise, Chen said. 10 billion Kethrai lives for 16 billion human lives. I think that's more than fair. You wouldn't... The human armada opened fire. The bombardment lasted 4 minutes. Precision strikes hit every major city, every military installation, every government facility. Thousands of years of Kethrai culture vaporized in seconds, 10 billion civilians dead before they could comprehend what was happening. When the firing stopped, Kethrai Prime was a broken ruin. The chamber was silent. Even the grief-stricken keening sounds from Vexith seemed muted, dreamlike. Ambassador Chen turned her attention from the broken Kethrai commander to Chancellor Drexen. Her expression hadn't changed. That same terrible calm remained. As I was saying, humanity is now open to peace negotiations. Are there any objections? Chancellor Drexen surged to his feet, his face contorted with fury. Are you insane? You've just declared war on the entire Senate. This is genocide. There will be no peace until your species is wiped from existence. For the first time, Ambassador Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Good, she said softly. I was hoping you would say that. The transmission ended. The fracture. 14 days had passed since the Kethrai extinction. There was no peace treaty, no surrender, no ceasefire. The Kethrai simply didn't exist anymore as a species. And in those 14 days, the Senate had torn itself apart. 4 core species had defected from the Senate entirely, declaring the Chancellor's actions illegitimate and forming their own coalition. All 4 had voted to stop the Kethrai when they first showed interest in humanity, but had been bullied into silence by the Chitauri. Now they blamed the Senate for every human death, and they were allying with humanity. For the first time in 570 years, the Senate was at war, and for the first time in its entire existence, it was at war with itself. Senator Valara sat in her private office, reviewing casualty projections. The numbers were apocalyptic. If this war continued, it would reshape the entire galaxy. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts.
Enter. A human walked in. Not a soldier or diplomat, but a civilian aide assigned to Senate members who had defected. He was young, casually dressed, and completely at ease despite being surrounded by species that wanted his kind extinct. Senator, he said cheerfully, I've been assigned as your liaison. Name's Marcus. Hope you don't mind the company. Valara stared at him in disbelief. You do realize your species is currently at war with half the Senate, yes? Marcus shrugged and sat down without being invited. Yeah, but you voted against the declaration of war. That makes you okay in my book. He pulled out what appeared to be a small knife and began cleaning his fingernails with it. Besides, I hear the Plenari haven't been in a real fight for centuries. Figured you could use someone who knows how this works. This is insane,
Valara muttered. Your people have turned the galaxy upside down in 34 years. Thousands of years of tradition, cooperation, peace, all destroyed. Marcus grinned. To be fair, Senator, your traditions let the Kethri murder 16 billion of us without intervention. Maybe those traditions needed breaking. Valara wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. He wasn't wrong. Tell me something, she said instead. How did you do it? How did your species end a civil war overnight? How did you unite millions of people who hated each other? Marcus stopped cleaning his nails and looked at her with suddenly serious eyes. Because something came along that we hated more. See, humans are really good at holding grudges against each other, right up until someone else attacks us. Then all that hate gets redirected outward. He smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. Give humanity a common enemy, Senator, and we become the most unified force in the universe. The Kethri learned that the hard way. And now you're doing it to us. Not to you, Marcus corrected, to the Chennari and anyone stupid enough to follow them. You voted against this war. That makes you smart. Valara leaned back in her chair, studying this strange creature before her. Your people are terrifying, you realize? Oh, absolutely, Marcus agreed cheerfully, but we're also loyal. Stick with us through this, Senator, and you'll never have to worry about threats again. And if I don't? Marcus's smile faded slightly. Then you become one of those threats, and as the Kethri discovered, that's not a good place to be. Epilogue. The war lasted another 3 years. The Chennari Ascendancy and their allies were systematically dismantled by a coalition of humans and defector species. Casualties on both sides were catastrophic. When it finally ended, the Senate was reorganized completely. The Chennari were reduced to a minor power. The defector species formed a new alliance with humanity at its center. 20 years after the war's end, Senator Valara, now Chancellor Valara, stood at a memorial on reconstructed New Beijing Earth. The monument listed the names of every human killed in both the Civil War and the Kethri invasion. Marcus stood beside her, older now, but still carrying that casual confidence she'd come to recognize in all humans. 20 billion names, she said quietly. Your species paid a terrible price. Yeah, but we also learned something important. What's that? He looked at the memorial, his expression thoughtful. Maybe the galaxy needed a species that understood loss, that knew how to fight, that wouldn't stand by while others suffered. He turned to her with a slight smile. Every paradise needs a guard dog, Chancellor. Someone willing to do the hard, ugly work of protecting it. And humans are that guard dog? Someone has to be. He gestured to the memorial. Besides, we remember every name here, every face, every story. That's what makes us different. We don't forget our dead, and we don't let them die in vain. Valara nodded slowly. The galaxy is safer now. Crueler, perhaps, but safer. Safe and kind aren't always the same thing, Marcus replied. Sometimes you need to be cruel to the monsters so you can be kind to everyone else. They stood in silence for a while, watching as thousands of humans came to pay respects to their dead, each one touching names, leaving flowers, telling stories. Finally, Valara spoke again. Do you ever regret the choices your species made? Marcus thought about it for a long moment. No, he eventually said. Regret implies we had better options. We didn't. The galaxy left us to die, and we refused. We did what we had to do to survive. He looked at her with those unsettlingly direct human eyes. The only thing I regret is that it took 20 billion deaths before anyone started listening. Valara had no response to that, because he was right. The humans tried peace, they tried diplomacy, they tried cooperation, and the galaxy responded with watching them die. So, humanity taught the galaxy a new lesson, that compassion has limits, that patience can break, that even prey animals will bare their teeth when cornered. And once those teeth were bared, the universe learned something it should have known all along. Humans weren't apex predators, but they survived on a world full of them, which meant they knew something that true apex predators never learned: how to fight dirty, fight smart, and never ever stop until the threat was eliminated. The galaxy had assumed humanity's fractured nature was weakness. It was actually their greatest strength. Because when humans finally united, they didn't just become dangerous, they became unstoppable. And the universe would never make the mistake of underestimating them again.